The traditional way of dealing with a horse is to break a horse. You break their spirit down until they don't fight back anymore. I believe that violence isn't the answer. Now he's happy.
Monty Roberts revolutionized horse training, taming horses using a silent language of kindness.
You would think that if Roberts made good on his method, people would flock to him like a modern-day Dr. Dolittle. But Roberts has his critics. For years, horse trainers either ignored Roberts or were openly hostile. But all of that changed when his work came to the attention of a lady who lived overseas and owned a few horses.
The Queen, she'd always been looking for a less violent way to train horses. And when she saw this, she said, "You have to take this to the world." She gave me the opportunity to prove it.
A best-selling novel called The Man Who Listens to Horses is #4 on the Times bestseller list.
A horse whisperer, Monty Roberts, had a really deep understanding of her that many other people didn't see.
An emotional day as the world says goodbye to Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest reigning monarch. Thousands of guests gathered for the state funeral, including world leaders and a renowned horse trainer from Solvang, California, Monty Roberts.
The Batagaika crater, the world's largest 1-kilometer-long permafrost crater, is expanding at a baffling rate due to the thawing of the permafrost. This has been exacerbated by global warming. Permafrost is any ground that remains completely frozen at 0 degrees Celsius or colder for at least 2 years straight. Permafrost is most common in regions with high mountains and in Earth's higher latitudes, near the South and North Poles. The crater is located in the Sakha Republic and reaches depths of up to 100 meters. In the 1960s, after deforestation led to the melting of the underground permafrost, it caused the land to sink. Over the years, the crater has only expanded and is locally called the Cave-In or Mega Slump by scientists. Russia is warming about 2.5 times faster than the rest of the world. As a consequence, the long frozen tundra that covers 65% of the country's landmass is melting. This is releasing greenhouse gases like methane stored in the thawed soil, which is 25 times more potent than CO2. The thawing permafrost causes very tangible, immediate infrastructural damage as well, such as buckling roadways, splitting houses, and disrupting pipelines. When a wildfire breaks out, the thawing fastens. Scientists are unsure of the exact rate at which the Batagaika crater is expanding. However, they warn that the soil beneath the slump contains dangerous amounts of organic carbon that will be released into the atmosphere as the permafrost thaws, further fueling the planet's warming. The Batagaika crater has now become a very glaring symbol of the impacts of global warming today.
Не знаю, не помню. Нет, вечером на выходе. Давай. Отойди вы.
Як поранення отримали, друзі? Середню кнопочку.
Можна переключити, бо тут повільно крапає.
Ми по можливості щодня слідкуємо за подіями, за новинами, за мапою бойових дій, за просуванням ворога. То не можна сказати, що вони десь не атакують, вони наступають на всіх ділянках фронту. І їхня активність дуже шалена. Але наші воїни хоробро стримують їх ціною власного здоров'я і життя. Тому, звичайно, активність шалена. Авдіївський напрямок – один із найгарячіших напрямків фронту, тому тут завжди дуже багато роботи. Це для кожного із нас важливо. Ми ж повинні працювати на одну мету, на перемогу, на порятунок наших воїнів-героїв. Кожен, хто сюди поступає, кого привозять, вони всі герої. Вони таке терплять, ці вибухи щоденні, поранення. Деякі бійці повертаються після одужання назад в підрозділ, продовжують вести свої бойові завдання. Це наш обов'язок. Якщо ми не будемо друг другу допомагати, то діла не буде.
Військове звання.
Цей теж в зелену зону.
Тоді близько 16, так?
Так. Зразу турнікет треба.
Слава Богу. А зараз лежиш спокійно.
Великий.
Ви одного забираєте чи забираєте двох?
Обох. Ні, ми двох забираємо.
Там дуже тяжко. Справляємося, ну тяжко. Оборону держимо. Да і все.
Що це за
Спереки сумка, таку тоненьку турундочку. Там у вас полосочки будуть.
This morning, with deep pride and soberness, I will pardon over 175,000 convictions related to the possession of cannabis and cannabis paraphernalia. Legalization does not turn back the clock on decades of harm that was caused by this war on drugs. Legalization does not erase the fact that nearly half of all drug arrests in Maryland during the early 2000s were for cannabis. It doesn't erase the fact that black Marylanders were 3 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis than white Marylanders before legalization. It doesn't erase the fact that having a conviction on your record means a harder time with everything, from housing to employment to education. It doesn't erase the fact that people who were arrested for cannabis 3 or 4 or 40 years ago still have those convictions on their records to this day. We cannot celebrate the benefits of legalization if we do not address the consequences of criminalization.
All of those big fields that way are all contaminated. This is the first year since 1914 that these fields haven't been cut for feed. That means that right now we have no income. We cannot farm the land that we're on.
Something toxic is being discovered in farmland across the United States.
They told us that this material would be safe to be used on our fields. It was happening all over, and nobody knew there was a problem. Nationwide, this is going to be an earthquake.
There are PFAS impacted farms in every state in the country. It's scary to think about. It's scary to learn that our regulatory agencies haven't been protecting us.
High levels of PFAS are being found in Maine's farmlands, where sewage sludge was used as fertilizer.
This is a letter from Department of Environmental Protection, and it says, will not pollute any waters of the state, will not contaminate the ambient air, will not constitute to a health hazard to health or welfare. Therefore, the department approves the application of their municipal sewage sludge. We thought at the time that we were doing the best for our property, but if we had known then what we know now, obviously, there's no way in God's green earth we would have done that.
PFAS, also known as forever chemicals, are a class of man-made chemicals that are widely used in all sorts of commercial and consumer products. They make things non-stick, waterproof, and grease-resistant. They are called forever chemicals because they don't break down or go away once they enter the environment. PFAS has been linked to a wide variety of health problems such as cancer, kidney and liver disease, birth defects, and decreased immune function. The Stones now have elevated levels of the chemical in their blood, and they say they're suffering from a variety of health issues. Adam Nordell purchased land for an organic farm, only to find out sludge had been used on the soil decades earlier.
I didn't know what PFAS was, and we learned that our land had been applied with sewage sludge in the early 1990s, and it turned out that our farm was severely contaminated with PFAS. It was terribly sad to walk away from our farm. So it was a beautiful farm, and we poured everything into it for 7 years. Nobody wants tainted food to wind up on people's dinner plates. No farmer wants that. Sewage sludge has been marketed to farmers as biosolids since the late 70s, and the idea is that it's rich in nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium, which are the key nutrients that you need to grow healthy crops. Unfortunately, it's a distillation of everything in practically every waste stream in society. So anything that gets certainly flushed down a toilet, gets rinsed down a drain in our homes, anything that might be washing out of commercial facilities. Unfortunately, there are innumerable sources of PFAS that can wind up in those sewage pipes.
Across the U.S., wastewater treatment facilities like this one produce biosolids from sewage waste. And as recently as 2022, 31% of all biosolids produced in the U.S. were applied to farmland. Another 24% were used for things like home gardens and landscaping.
We're not always thinking about what goes down the sewer and what happens to it. It comes here, it contains PFAS. If it's in our biosolids, it came from our communities. And what we're looking at for solutions is going to be very expensive and very challenging.
The USDA, FDA, and EPA told CNN they are coordinating agency efforts to address PFAS concerns in addition to working with the states. Adam Nordell's farm was purchased by Maine Farmland Trust and will be used for researching PFAS. Fred Stone's land is too contaminated to ever be farmed again, but he's still holding out hope that the state will purchase his property someday.
I hope that I live long enough that they somehow come up with a solution for this. I am not holding my breath that that's going to happen.
और अलग अलग प्रभावों से हम जीवन से गुजरते हैं और कभी ना कभी हम सबके मन के अंदर एक प्रश्न तो आता ही है कि अगर मैं संसार में आया हूं तो मैं संसार में क्यों आया हूं। जब से मानव ने अपनी चेतना को समझने का प्रयास किया, अपने कॉन्शियस सेल्फ को समझने का प्रयास किया, तो हम यहां क्यों आए हैं, ये अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ा प्रश्न चिन्ह है, जिसके लिए बहुत से लोगों ने मंथन किया, कोशिश की कि इस प्रश्न का वो उत्तर दे सके। भगवान बुद्ध ने इस विडंबना को एक अलग तरीके से देखा। भगवान बुद्ध अपने आप से प्रश्न पूछते हैं कि अगर एक दिन मुझे संसार को छोड़ करके जाना है, और ये परम सत्य है, आएगा सो जाएगा राजा रंग फकीर, एक सिंहासन पर चढ़ा एक बांधा जाए जंजीर। हम सब संसार में अगर पैदा हुए हैं तो एक दिन संसार का त्याग करके, संसार को छोड़ करके हम एक नए सफर की ओर, एक नए मंजिल की ओर जरूर बढ़ेंगे। तो भगवान बुद्ध कहते हैं कि अगर एक दिन मुझे संसार को छोड़ करके जाना है तो मैं संसार में आया क्यों हूं? और इस प्रश्न के उत्तर के लिए वो अपनी घर गृहस्थी, अपना राजपाट, सांसारिक मोह का त्याग करके वो अपने जीवन का एक मकसद बना लेते हैं कि इस प्रश्न का उत्तर मैं पाऊं। लेकिन वो भी एक बहुत एक्सट्रीम पाथ की ओर निकल जाते हैं। आप जानते हैं, कड़ी तपस्या करते हैं, अपने शरीर का तप करते हैं, लेकिन ये प्रश्न का उत्तर कहीं ना कहीं उनसे बहुत दूर रहता है। एक दिन वो तपस्या कर रहे थे और एक सुजाता नाम की महिला एक गाना गा रही थी, जिस गाने के बोल का अर्थ था कि सितार के तार को इतना भी मत कसो कि वो टूट जाए और इतना ढीला भी मत छोड़ो कि उसमें से कोई स्वर ही ना निकले। और जब ये बोल भगवान बुद्ध के कानों में पड़ते हैं तो सडनली भगवान बुद्ध के जीवन के अंदर एक रियलाइजेशन होती है, एक अनुभूति होती है, और वो अनुभूति उनको संसार की वासनाओं से मुक्त करती है, जिसको उन्होंने निर्वाण कहा, जिसने उन्होंने मोक्ष कहा। और अनुभूति केवल सिंपल थी कि अगर मैं इतने एक्सट्रीम पाथ में चली जाऊं कि मेरा जीवन ही ना रहे, अगर मैंने शरीर को तपा तपा करके शरीर का ही अंत कर दूं, तब मैंने जीवन में क्या प्राप्त किया? कुछ भी नहीं किया। खाली हाथ में संसार में आया, खाली हाथ में जा रहा हूं। और अगर संसार में मैं इतना इनडिफरेंस होकर के जी रहा हूं कि मैंने ये कभी पूछा ही नहीं कि मैं संसार में क्यों आया हूं, तभी मैं संसार में कुछ नहीं पाऊंगा। तो दोनों एक्सट्रीम पाथ से हट करके मुझे एक मिडिल फोर्थ पाथ ढूंढना है। और जब ये रियलाइजेशन उनके अंदर होती है, जो उनकी वास्तविक सत्यता है वो उभरती है।
It's a glittering premiere at the Chicago Theater for Warner Brothers' I'll See You in My Dreams. A real dream has come true, for this benefit premiere launches a drive for a new hospital sponsored by the film star Danny Thomas, here arriving with his family. Years ago, Danny vowed he'd build a hospital if he ever became famous. $32,000 are subscribed, the first of 1 million Danny Thomas tells friends he'll raise for the St. Jude's Hospital of his dreams.
They said it couldn't be done. They said that it was a task which would break my heart. They said it was impossible. At this very moment, as I speak to you, in the city of Memphis, Tennessee, there is being constructed a hospital in the form of a star. There it is, in concrete, glass, and steel, to offer help to all the children of the world, regardless of race, creed, or economic status. You and I have vowed that we will do everything in our power, spiritually, physically, mentally, and financially, to bring about the defeat of these catastrophic diseases. We're going to begin with leukemia, and by God's grace, after defeating it, go on to other diseases.
When we came to St. Jude, I asked the doctor, "Can you treat my child?" And he said, "No. We're going to cure him."
For me, I get asked, what's my identity? Being a college professor, working in the cattle industry, designing equipment. Autism is an important part of who I am. I wouldn't want to change it because I don't like the illogical way that most people think. But it's not my primary identity. I looked really terrible when I was 2 years old. Kids can look really bad. Then as you work with them, some kind of pull out of it, others don't. But you don't know until you start to work with them. And that's why early intervention is so important. And what I'm seeing as I travel around the country is we're doing a better job on the early intervention, but where we're really falling down is with the older kids, teaching job skills, driving. That's going to take longer because of the multitasking issue. I did 200 miles on dirt roads at my aunt's ranch, picking up the mail every day, which was 3 miles away, before I did traffic. A lot more practice in really safe places. When I was 4 years old, I was nonverbal, had all the symptoms of severe autism. I was fortunate to get into a really good early intervention program. Lots of turn-taking games, teaching me language, teaching table manners. That was done in a much more structured way back in the 50s. That I want to demonstrate is how you walk back by them to get them to come up in the chute. If you've got 3-year-olds that are not talking, the worst thing you can do is just to wait. You got to start working with that kid now. What you got to do with kids on the spectrum is stretch them. Stretch them just outside the comfort zone, but give them choices. Now, the way I got into the cattle industry is I was exposed to it when I was a teenager. I came from a non-ag background, and when the opportunity came up to visit my aunt's ranch, Mother gave me a choice. I could go for a week and come home if I hated it, or stay all summer. Not going wasn't one of the choices, but giving some choices of stretching activities. You see, a person on the spectrum has lots of memory. So let's compare to computer systems. So you got the cloud computing memory back here. Tons and tons of memory, but a really small chip. Working memory is a problem. And so anything that requires remembering a sequence of steps, like maybe doing the ice cream machine at McDonald's, pilot's checklist. And when I worked in a dairy when I was a graduate student, they had a checklist on the wall on how to set up the dairy equipment, the milking machine equipment, and I would have been in a lot of trouble without that checklist. That's a real easy thing to do. Let's look at situations in the environment that can cause problems with people with autism, and that's lighting. Certain kinds of lighting flickers. I was just in a hotel room the other day that was completely horrible. It had chevron black and white stripes on the floor and compact fluorescent lights. And I could see the pattern on the floor going like this. Now, I tolerated it okay, but there are certain people where this would be completely awful. I have some sound sensitivity problems. One of the ways to help get over sound sensitivity is let the kid control it. All right, let's say he's afraid of the vacuum cleaner. Then let the kid turn it on and off. Let the kid control that vacuum cleaner, where they are controlling that sound. And then they can sometimes learn to tolerate it if they control it. I get asked all the time, should I tell the kid they have autism? If he's having a great time, I wouldn't bother telling them. And I'm seeing too many kids where their whole identity is autism. And they say, oh, I want to be an autism activist. And I explain to them, you will be a better activist if you can go out and excel in a job, maybe an engineering job, an art job, writing job, or something like that. And then you do the activist stuff. Being a woman in the feed yard industry was much harder than being autistic, way harder. Well, I don't do the bar scene. That's too socially complicated for me. Also, I can't hear. I've got some auditory processing problems, and with background noise, I can't hear. You know, I think what makes my life interesting and worthwhile is work. Also, if you quickly walk back by them like that, they'll go forward. I was very happy to have a lady come up to me in the airport last night and tell me that she'd read my books and looked at some of my videos and that it really helped her daughter. That's something that gives meaning to life.
Families who lost loved ones in 2 fatal Boeing crashes are now urging the Justice Department to prosecute the company and impose a $24 billion fine. Nearly 350 people were killed in the 737 MAX crashes in Ethiopia and Indonesia back in 2018 and 2019. The Justice Department deferred prosecution after charging Boeing for allegedly misleading the FAA, but a decision on whether to proceed with the trial is expected next month. The families were on Capitol Hill Tuesday as Boeing CEO addressed the company's safety issues, including a mid-air door blowout.
Renowned for their climbing skills, exemplary strength, and endurance at high altitudes, Sherpas play the most invaluable role when it comes to mountaineering expeditions. Sherpas are guardian angels of the Himalayas, and without them, every expedition is incomplete. The Sherpa, also called Sharwa, are a group of mountain-dwelling people in Nepal, Sikkim, and Tibet. They also live in parts of Australia, North America, and Europe. The name Sherpa means people living in the East. They began to migrate in the 15th century to make a living by working as traders, herders, and farmers. Sherpas belong to Tibetan culture and speak a language called Sherpa, which is closely related to the Tibetan language. However, the greatest number of Sherpas live in Nepal and speak Nepali in addition to their mother tongue. The Sherpas of Nepal live in Solu Khumbu district in the fresh environs of Himalayas. This area consists of 2 regions which are connected by the Sun Kosi River and the Khumbu region at an elevation of 12,000 to 14,000 feet. The Khumbu region stretches from the Chinese border in the east to the banks of the Kosi River in the west. Sherpas lead a utilitarian life, with many surviving through trade and subsistence farming. They grow crops like wheat and potatoes, and some also raise yak. Sherpas often keep moving like nomads and live in multiple small stone huts in highlands and lowlands, depending on the season. The term Sherpa refers to a variety of ethnic groups that have exhibited excellent mountaineering and trekking skills. The Sherpa's job is to set up the camp, manage the porters, and guide the trekkers to safety. The word Sherpa has become synonymous with those working as mountain guides. The Sherpa guides are not just the strong force behind the expedition, carrying extra gear, food, oxygen, and water bottles, but are also considered expert navigators. They can endure freezing temperatures down to negative 50 degrees Celsius and can help the climbers negotiate ice falls, avalanches, and extreme altitudes. Often thought of as self-sacrificing, Sherpas are considered as the best friends of foreign mountaineers. Scientific tests and an American study conducted in 1976 suggest that Sherpas are genetically adapted to high altitudes. Adaptations include unique hemoglobin-binding enzymes, doubled nitric oxide production, hearts that can utilize glucose, and lungs with increased efficiency in low oxygen conditions. For Sherpas, the mountain peaks are revered as God's home, which should be respected and not conquered. Even Sherpas who do not pursue climbing believe that accidents occur when the gods are not duly respected. They believe that climbing expeditions must proceed with a prayer ceremony or puja to make an offering to the gods. Sherpas respect the mountains and therefore have attempted to prevent foreign climbers from engaging in profaning or polluting activities. They do not encourage acts like the killing of animals and the burning of garbage, which they believe will lead to disrespecting the gods. Dal bhat, the staple dish of Nepal, is what fuels many Sherpas for long and strenuous expeditions. It is a meal consisting of a heap of white rice along with curried vegetables and lentil juice. A carb-based diet is very important to keep the Sherpas strong and provide enough energy at high altitudes. The genetically adapted guardian angels of Mount Everest are considered invincible. However, many Sherpas have lost their lives or are being left to die on mountains while performing their services dutifully. There are grim stories of many Sherpas who were left in the mountains to fend for themselves. The Himalayas, although considered as the lifeblood for the Sherpas, can prove deadly for the ethnic group, indigenous to the cold peaks. Tenzing Norgay Sherpa's joint summit with Sir Edmund Hillary in 1953 is considered as the proudest moment for the Sherpa community. The Sherpas are truly called the Army of Mountains and play an integral part in Nepal's tourism industry.